single mother takes her daughter to work, and the millionaire CEO stops cold at the sight of her pendant. Before we dive in, tell me, where in the world are you listening from right now? Drop your city in the comments so we can see just how far this story travels. And when we reach the end, I dare you to rate it from 0 to 10, because this one might just break your heart. Now, let's begin. It was mid-morning in New York. Cold light spilled through the soaring glass panels of the Parker Tower lobby, where the sharp echo of expensive leather shoes tapped a hurried rhythm across polished marble. Daniel Parker, CEO of Parker & Co., a man whose days were scheduled down to the very minute, had just bent down to retrieve a fountain pen that slipped from his suit pocket. But when he straightened, time simply stopped. Standing before him was a little girl 6 years old at most, with eyes that seemed to hold stories of their own, and around her neck hung a delicate silver pendant, engraved with an intricate design. It couldn't be mistaken. He had clasped that very pendant around a young woman's neck 15 years ago, beneath the crimson light of a setting sun on a faraway beach, sealing it with a promise he never kept. Daniel's heart skipped. His breath caught. Memories rushed back like an unrelenting tide. Laughter tangled with ocean wind. The warmth of her hand in his, and a goodbye that was meant to be temporary, but lasted a lifetime. And now, that pendant was here again, resting on the chest of a child he had never seen before. Inside, a building bearing his own name. The Parker Tower gleamed under the chandelier's glow, every footstep echoing like the heartbeat of a world that never slowed. Deals worth hundreds of millions were struck here, and the weak were swallowed whole. Kate Rodriguez, 32, single mother, moved briskly across the lobby, balancing a tray of coffee cups in her hands. She worked the morning shift at Manhattan Brews, the tiny cafe tucked into the building's ground floor, and the night shift at a laundromat in Queens. Every step she took was a quiet balancing act between motherhood and survival. At her side was Sophie, 6 years old, with wide brown eyes and a smile that seemed to belong to a brighter world. The little girl had a habit of greeting security guards, receptionists, and anyone willing to pause and listen to her chatter. On the other side of the lobby, Daniel Parker, 37, sharp in a tailored suit, his platinum watch catching the light, moved with the purpose of a man whose every second was worth a small fortune. His mind was a constant storm of numbers, strategies, and shareholder demands, until he bent down to retrieve that fallen pen and saw Sophie. Just one look, and everything he thought he'd left in the past came rushing back. A sunlit summer, a girl whose smile cost him more than sleep, and a promise that had never been fulfilled. Part 1. The look that spanned 15 years. The glass door of Manhattan Brews swung open with the soft chime of wind bells. The warm scent of freshly ground coffee mingled with the buttery aroma of morning pastries, wrapping around the November chill like a comforting embrace. Sophie, her brown ponytail bouncing with every step, darted inside as if this place were her second home. Daniel Parker followed a moment later. He hadn't planned on walking into this cafe. Men like him rarely had the luxury for something as ordinary as buying their own coffee. But the silver pendant around that little girl's neck, it had pulled him in, as though an invisible thread had tightened and drawn him forward. Crossing the threshold, it took his eyes a few seconds to adjust to the warm golden light inside. And then through the hiss of the espresso machine and the low hum of conversations, he saw her, Kate Rodriguez. The brown hair that had once danced in an ocean breeze was now pinned neatly at the nape of her neck, though a few strands had slipped free in the morning rush. A navy apron hugged her slim but strong frame. Her hands moved with practiced precision, pouring milk, wiping the counter, pressing buttons as if her work were a well-rehearsed dance. And then, by some unconscious habit, she looked up. Their eyes met. 15 years. Yet in that instant, every summer day, every burst of laughter, and every aching goodbye came flooding back, as if no time had passed at all. Daniel saw her eyes widen in surprise, only for them to narrow a heartbeat later, cool and unreadable, as though she'd never known him. A customer behind him spoke up gently. Large latte. Please. Kate turned away with a practiced smile, as if Daniel were just another stranger in line. Daniel understood. He wasn't just looking at the girl from his past. He was standing in front of the one woman he had truly let slip away. Daniel stepped toward the counter, each footfall feeling like a step deeper into an old photograph. Sophie was nearby, proudly showing an older man the picture she'd drawn on a napkin. Kate glanced over, watchful, but not avoiding his gaze. Good morning. His voice was low, steady exactly as she'd once remembered. Large Americano. Please. Size? She asked, tone calm, as if she had no idea who he was. Large, he said, holding her gaze, searching for even a flicker of recognition. It's a beautiful morning, isn't it? Kate's lips curved just slightly, as if he'd said something absurd. Sir, it's 8 p.m. I have 15 orders in line and a daughter running loose. If you want to talk about the weather, I'd suggest calling the meteorology service. A few customers in line chuckled under their breath. Daniel felt the heat rise to his face, but instead of stepping back, he leaned in just slightly. Your daughter, he said, glancing toward Sophie. She's adorable. She $3.50. Kate cut in, setting his coffee on the counter. Next, he took the cup, but Sophie suddenly appeared with a tray of sugar packets. The slight bump sent a splash of hot coffee across his crisp white shirt. He waited for the flurry of apologies, but instead, Kate reached beneath the counter and handed him a clean apron. Here, she said, matter-of-factly, it'll look better than walking into your meeting with that shirt ruined. Besides, now you've got a legitimate excuse for being late. Daniel stared at her. Still the same Kate, direct, practical, and utterly unmoved by the luxury or power he carried. Daniel realized her world had never revolved around him. And maybe he wanted to step into that world again. He stepped out of the cafe, but didn't go far. Through the glass, he watched the curve of her shoulders as she wiped the counter, the way she leaned in to speak with a customer, the familiar line of her profile. It pulled him back to that summer by the sea, to mornings when her smile was the first thing that lit his day. He remembered the last night they'd spent together, the silver pendant in his hand, the promise to return, a promise he'd let vanish in the race of his career. Inside, Sophie darted between tables, sometimes tugging at her mother's apron, whispering something that made Kate smile. It wasn't a dazzling smile, but the kind that quietly warmed a room. A regular teased, Kate, that guy in the suit keeps staring at you. Kate didn't look up. Maybe he just likes my Americano, she replied, and kept working. Daniel saw it. Then she had learned how to live without him. But he had never learned how to live without thinking of her. After a short meeting upstairs, Daniel left the tower, but his mind never left the cafe. The image of that silver pendant, of Kate's guarded eyes, kept replaying. It couldn't be coincidence. He pulled out his phone and called Marcus, his most trusted aide. Marcus, I need you to find information on a barista at Manhattan Brews. Brown hair, about 32. Has a 6-year-old daughter named Sophie. A brief pause. Understood, sir. Deadline. Yesterday. When he hung up, Daniel stared down at the rush of traffic below. He knew he'd just opened a door, the same door he'd closed 15 years ago. But this time, He wasn't sure he'd want to close it again. Inside the cafe, Kate wiped the counter, aware of the strange weight of someone's attention, even though the glass was now empty. Her heart beat a little faster, not out of fear, but because she knew this was the beginning of something dangerous. Both of them understood fate had placed them back in the same frame, and this time, stepping out of it wouldn't be easy. Part 2. The word daddy. The grinder roared. The scent of rich espresso mingled with the buttery warmth of freshly baked muffins. Conversations overlapped with the clack of laptop keys. Manhattan Brews at rush hour was always its own chaotic symphony, each person lost in the orbit of their own world. Daniel stepped inside for the second time that week. Marcus would definitely consider it unusual. Dark charcoal suit, navy tie, shoes polished to a perfect sheen. He looked every inch the New York finance elite, but his eyes were searching for something entirely different. And then he saw her. Sophie sat in the corner booth, legs swinging, hands wrapped around a steaming cup of hot cocoa. She beamed when she spotted him, her eyes lighting up, as if she'd just found the hero of her favorite bedtime story. Kate was behind the counter, either unaware of his arrival or pretending to be. Daniel made his way to Sophie's table. "Morning, kiddo," he said softly. Sophie tilted her head. "You came back. Mommy says important people don't come twice." Daniel chuckled. "Maybe I'm not that important." Emotional beat. In that moment, he realized it had been a long time since anyone had spoken to him without calculating his title or his net worth. This little girl saw him as a person, not a CEO. The cafe door chimed as another customer walked in, and Kate hurried to handle a large order. Daniel sat down next to Sophie, absently undoing his cufflinks, shedding some of that rigid boardroom composure. She toyed with the silver pendant at her neck, then asked suddenly, "Do you like my necklace? Mommy says it's very special." His throat tightened. "Yes, it's beautiful," he managed, keeping his voice even. And then, without warning, Sophie's voice rang out, bright and unfiltered, carrying over the hum of the cafe. "Daddy, can you buy me a muffin too?" The room seemed to pause for half a second. Spoons stopped stirring. Eyes turned toward the small corner table. Somewhere, a whisper started. Daniel froze, eyes wide. "Sophie," he began carefully, but she only grinned, oblivious to the ripple she had set off. One word, innocently spoken by a child, can stir a storm of memories and unanswered questions. Kate heard it, loud and clear. Her heart slammed against her ribs as she spun around, cappuccino nearly slipping from her hands. The weight of every gaze in the cafe shifted from Daniel to her. She forced her face into control and strode to the table, bending down to meet Sophie's eyes. "Sweetheart, what did we talk about? We don't call strangers Daddy." "Wait, but he's nice, and he looks like—" Kate's hand rested gently but firmly on her daughter's shoulder, stopping her words. Daniel rose to his feet, his voice low but calm. "It's okay. She didn't mean any harm." Kate's gaze met his cool, guarded. "Mr. Parker, I'd appreciate it if you didn't encourage her." The air thickened. Whispers spread like wildfire. "Is that his kid? They kind of look alike. You think they—" Daniel glanced around, suddenly aware he was standing in the middle of a rumor he'd never seen coming. Sometimes, the truth left unspoken can be louder than any explanation, and the look in Kate's eyes told him there were things he didn't know. When the stares began to fade, Kate led Sophie into the staff area for a quiet talk. Daniel stayed put, rolling the empty coffee cup in his hands. A part of him wanted to leave to let the past stay buried, but another part, stronger, kept him anchored to his seat. Marcus called with updates on his schedule. Daniel barely listened, his eyes fixed on that staff door. He remembered Kate, 15 years ago, saying she wanted a big family. She wanted a man who would always be there. Back then, he hadn't been able to give her that. The door swung open. Kate emerged without looking at him, sliding seamlessly back into her work. Sophie trailed behind, her eyes dimmer than before. As they passed, she whispered, "Sorry. I thought maybe..." Daniel bent slightly, offering a faint smile. "It's okay, kiddo." But as he looked into those clear, searching eyes, he knew this was only the beginning. Sometimes the wrong word can lead you straight to the truth you've been avoiding. That night, on the third floor of a modest walk-up, the kitchen light still glowed. Daniel took a steadying breath and rang the bell. Footsteps hurried toward the door. It swung open to reveal Kate in a worn sweater, hair loosely tied back, eyes alert under the hallway light. "Daniel." There was a thread of caution in her voice. "What are you doing here?" "We need to talk," he said, his tone low but certain. "There's something about a man from a world of power and glass towers standing at the threshold of your quiet life with old memories clinging between you that can be more dangerous than the past itself." She let him in, but didn't offer him a seat. Sophie slept in the small back room, the ceiling fan whirring lazily. The tiny kitchen was tidy, the fridge humming, the table worn smooth from years of use. Daniel took in the space. It spoke of someone who had learned to stretch every dollar. "This morning at the cafe," he began, "it's already spreading. The tabloids are running with a story that I have a secret daughter. The board's worried about shareholder reaction." Kate crossed her arms. "And that concerns me." How? He met her eyes. "I want you to pretend to be my girlfriend, just for a month, until the noise dies down." She let out a sharp laugh, humorless. "You're serious?" Daniel nodded. $50,000. Half now, half. When it's over." The air froze. Kate turned her back, gripping the edge of the sink. "You think I can be bought to cover your scandal?" "No," he said, his voice gentler now. "I think you'd do something if it meant helping Sophie. Some offers don't just test your pride, they hit your deepest fear. How far you'd go to protect the child you love more than your own life." Kate poured herself a glass of water, her hand trembling slightly. "And you expect me to believe you'll keep your word? 15 years ago, you promised you'd come back. You disappeared." Daniel lowered his head. "I was wrong, but this time, I won't walk away. At least not until this is done." Her eyes flashed with anger, and something else hurt. "You know what I hate most? That you think money fixes everything." "Not everything," he replied instantly, "but it can buy time, and I need time to kill this story. You could use that time for Sophie." Her silence was telling. $50,000 could clear her debts, fix Sophie's room, start a college fund, but it would also mean stepping back into the media spotlight next to the man who'd once broken her completely. Sometimes the choice isn't between right and wrong, but between heartbreak and something even harder. The quiet stretched on. Daniel didn't push. He just waited, his eyes locked on hers. Finally, Kate exhaled, as though letting go of some invisible weight. 1 month. No more. And you don't interfere with my life or Sophie's outside of what's necessary. He nodded, a faint smile tugging at his mouth, careful not to show too much relief. Reaching into his jacket, he pulled out an envelope and set it on the table. 25 now. The rest when it's over. Kate looked at it, then pushed it back toward him. You can bring it tomorrow. I need to talk to Sophie first. Daniel nodded and stepped back, understanding that this small victory had nothing to do with the money, and everything to do with her allowing him, however briefly, back into their story. Sometimes a nod isn't just agreement. It's the quiet acknowledgement that fate has returned to your door, and you can't keep it shut forever. Part 3. The $50. 000 agreement. It was late. The yellow glow of a street lamp spilled over a row of weathered brick buildings on a quiet corner in Queens. The November wind carried the scent of exhaust and the damp chill off the river. Daniel stepped out of the sleek black sedan, the soft click of his polished leather shoes brushing against a sidewalk littered with dry leaves. He looked up at the faded numbers above the door. This was the address Marcus had found the place Kate and Sophie called home. The apartment was on the 3rd floor. The kitchen light was still on. Daniel drew in a slow breath, pressed the buzzer, and waited. Footsteps approached from inside, and then the door swung open. Kate stood there in a worn sweater, hair loosely tied back, eyes alert, but shadowed by fatigue, still catching the light in a way that seemed to hold something untamed. Daniel, her voice carried a thread of caution. "What are you doing here? We need to talk," he said, his voice low and steady, emotional beat. There's a certain kind of fear that comes when someone from a world of power and glass towers stands on the threshold of your quiet life, carrying memories you thought were long buried. She let him in, but didn't offer him a seat. From the small back room came the slow, steady whirl of a ceiling fan. Sophie's room. The cramped kitchen smelled faintly of dish soap, a wooden table worn smooth by years of use, a fridge that hummed with a tired persistence. Daniel took in the neatness, the small touches that spoke of someone used to stretching every dollar. "What happened at the cafe?" he began. "It's already out there. The tabloids are saying I have a secret daughter. The board is nervous about shareholder fallout." Kate crossed her arms, her gaze cool. "And how is that my problem?" He met her eyes. "I want you to pretend to be my girlfriend, just for a month, until the rumors die down." Her laugh was sharp, humorless. "You're serious?" Daniel nodded. $50,000. Half now, half when it's over. The air seemed to hold its breath. Kate turned away, bracing herself against the sink. "You think I'd sell myself to cover your scandal?" "No." His voice softened. "I think you'd do something if it was for Sophie." Emotional beat. Some offers don't just test your pride. They reach for the one fear you guard most fiercely. How far you'd go to protect the child you love more than your own life. Kate poured herself a glass of water, her hand trembling slightly. "And you expect me to believe you'll keep your word? 15 years ago, you promised you'd come back. You disappeared." Daniel lowered his head. "I was wrong, but this time, I won't walk away. At least not until the agreement is over." Her eyes flashed a mixture of anger and hurt. "You know what I hate most, that you think money can fix everything. Not everything," he replied quietly. "But money can buy time, and I need time to kill this story. You could use that time for Sophie." The truth of it settled heavy between them. $50,000 could erase her credit card debt, fix Sophie's room, start a college fund, but it would also drag her back into a media storm, standing beside the man who had once broken her completely. Sometimes, the choice isn't between right and wrong, but between heartbreak and something even harder. The silence stretched. Daniel didn't press her, but he didn't look away either. Finally, Kate exhaled, as though shedding some invisible weight. 1 month, no more, and you stay out of my life. And Sophie's outside of what's necessary for this arrangement." Daniel nodded, the corner of his mouth lifting into a faint, careful smile. From his jacket, he pulled out an envelope and set it on the table. 25 now. The rest when it's over?" She glanced at it, then pushed it back toward him. "You can bring it tomorrow." "I need to talk to Sophie first." He nodded and stepped back, knowing that this small victory wasn't bought with money. It was granted by her allowing him, however briefly, back into their story. Sometimes, a nod isn't just an agreement. It's the quiet admission that fate has come knocking again. and you can't keep the door shut forever. Part 4. Moving into the penthouse. Saturday morning, a sleek black SUV eased to a stop in front of Parker Tower. Sophie pressed her face to the window, her eyes wide as she gazed up at the towering skyscraper, sunlight glinting off the glass like it had been dipped in gold. "Mommy, are we going to live here?" she squealed, her voice bubbling with the kind of wonder reserved for fairy tales. Beside her, Kate gripped the strap of her bag tighter. She had never thought she'd be back here, back to a place where every inch screamed luxury, and where Daniel belonged. The driver opened the door, and Daniel appeared, crisp white shirt, black slacks, a key card in his hand. They stopped at the penthouse door. A soft beep sounded as the card slid through the lock, and the door swung open to reveal a sunlit expanse, gleaming hardwood floors, high ceilings crowned with crystal chandeliers, floor-to-ceiling glass walls that slid open to a balcony overlooking all of Central Park. Sophie darted in, her tiny shoes tapping against the polished floor, laughter echoing in the vast space. Kate lingered on the threshold, her heart quickening with the feeling that she didn't belong here. Sometimes, stepping through a doorway isn't just about changing addresses. It's about crossing into the territory of a past you've tried to keep locked away. Daniel led Sophie down the hall to a room at the far end. When the door opened, color spilled out a white wooden bookshelf lined with children's storybooks and comics. A small desk tucked beneath a sunny window, shelves displaying plush animals and dolls. A world map covered one wall, dotted with tiny star stickers marking places to explore. Sophie's eyes widened. "Is this all mine?" Daniel smiled, kneeling to her height. "Yes, I had someone set it up for you. Thought you might like dinosaurs and fairy tales." She grabbed the nearest teddy bear and hugged it tight, spinning around the room in delighted circles. Kate stood in the doorway, her expression betraying surprise. She knew Daniel could buy anything, but she hadn't expected him to think of every small detail. Daniel glanced back, his voice softer. "Kids need their own space." I wanted her to feel at home. Kate didn't answer. The words were simple, but they landed somewhere deep in her chest. Thoughtfulness isn't measured in the price of a gift. It's in the way someone imagines your happiness before you even ask. Later, Kate found herself in the gleaming kitchen, sunlight streaming through the wide windows. Stainless steel appliances shone like new. Marble counters gleamed. Daniel was unpacking boxes of cereal, crackers, fresh fruit, filling the pantry like someone stocking a home. "Not a stage. You don't have to do this," she said quietly. He looked up. "Do what?" "Prepare everything. Sophie will be fine. We don't need this much." Daniel paused, meeting her eyes. "Kate, this is your home, at least for this month. I don't want Sophie to feel like she's just a guest." Kate tightened her grip on her bag strap. "And what about me? Are you planning to do anything to make me feel like I'm not just a prop in this arrangement?" The air stilled. Daniel seemed about to say something, but instead he poured her a glass of water and slid it across the counter, one step at a time. Sometimes the real distance isn't in square footage or in the things you own. It's in the words left unspoken and the wounds that never healed. Night fell, and the city lights painted the ceiling with shifting reflections. Sophie was asleep, curled around her new teddy bear. Kate stood alone on the balcony, the wind tugging gently at her hair, her gaze sweeping across the dark silhouette of Central Park. The glass door slid open. Daniel stepped out and draped a soft wool scarf over her shoulders. "It gets cold up here," he murmured. She gave a small nod, her eyes still on the skyline. "All of this, it disappears in a month." He was quiet for a moment before saying, Maybe, or maybe some things will stay. Her heart skipped at the weight of those words, but her voice stayed steady. I'm not here to dream. Daniel, I'm here for Sophie. He nodded, offering no argument. They stood there in the quiet, side by side, two people who had once been close enough to share a future. Now, just silhouettes in the same night. Some moments don't need promises or plans, only the knowledge that, for now, they are both standing in the same place. Part 5. The Bubble Pool. Winter sunlight slipped through the sheer white curtains, scattering soft gold across the still surface of the penthouse's indoor pool. The water shimmered a deep, clear blue, gentle ripples catching the light. The air was warm from the hidden heating system. Spring in the middle of December. Daniel stepped in, sleeves rolled to his forearms, coffee cup in hand. He paused by the glass wall, watching. Kate stood at the edge of the pool with Sophie. She wore a light, flowing maxi dress, her hair tied up high. She was bent over, fastening Sophie's floaty with quiet patience. Sophie, in a bright yellow one-piece swimsuit, eyes sparkling like little stars, chirped, "Yes, Mommy," before leaping in with a splash that sent water droplets glittering through the air. Her laughter rang through the sunlit room, and Daniel found himself smiling without thinking. Emotional beat. Sometimes, all it takes is standing still and listening to a child's laughter for the weight you've been carrying to soften, if only for a moment. Daniel was about to step out onto the balcony when Sophie's voice cut through the sound of the water. "Mommy, look what I found." She came running back, clutching a large container of laundry detergent. Kate was busy tying her hair, unaware of what was about to happen. Daniel had just enough time to register what was in Sophie's hands before. The entire box was tipped into the pool. Within seconds, white froth began to spread across the surface. The pool filter, swirling it into massive clouds of bubbles that quickly swallowed the water in soft, foamy mounds. Sophie squealed in delight, charging straight into the sea of white. "Good Lord," Daniel blurted, part shock, part amusement. "Sophie, what were you thinking?" Kate cried, rushing forward. "Bubbles make swimming more fun," the little girl declared, tossing a handful into the air. Daniel set his coffee down, stripped off his shirt, rolled up his pants, and waded in to pull Sophie back to the edge. "At least she's creative," he said with a half laugh, half scolding tone that made Kate bite her lip to keep from laughing herself. Emotional beat. There are moments when innocence bulldozes through every rule, pulling everyone into the same heartbeat. Kate was ready to insist they start cleaning immediately, until Daniel scooped up a fistful of bubbles and tossed them gently into her hair. The airy foam clung to her dark strands, and she couldn't hold back a laugh. "Mommy's laughing," Sophie squealed. That was all it took. In seconds, the three of them were locked in a full-on bubble battle. Sophie made herself a suit of armor from the white foam. Daniel pretended to slip and fall so Sophie could save him. Kate stealthily shoved a pillow of bubbles into Daniel's back when he wasn't looking. Laughter filled the vast, echoing room, laughter loud enough to drown out the distance that had always been there. Daniel caught Kate's eyes through the haze of foam. They were bright, open, unguarded. For the first time since seeing her again, she wasn't holding a wall between them. She realized she was smiling too much and turned away, but he'd already seen it. Emotional beat. Sometimes, to draw someone closer, you don't need promises or plans. You just need one moment of real laughter together. When the bubbles began to fade and the water calmed, they sat together on the pool's edge. Sophie leaned sleepily against her mother's shoulder, eyes drifting shut. Daniel sat across from them, hair damp and messy, idly turning a glass of water in his hands. "Today was the first time I've seen both of you laugh like that," he said quietly. Kate looked down at Sophie, her voice softer, She's never had a man play with her like that. I don't want her hoping for too much. Daniel's gaze sharpened, his tone certain. I'm not going to disappear again. Kate looked up, meeting his eyes, and for a split second, she wanted to believe him, but her voice stayed steady. We only have a month. Daniel. He nodded, though the faint smile tugging at his mouth suggested he didn't see it that way. Some words you don't dare believe, but you still keep them tucked away, like a seed, waiting for the right moment to grow. Part 6. The Debut Dinner. Friday afternoon. Daniel walked back into the penthouse with a serious look on his face. Kate was curled up on the couch with a book, Sophie beside her, sketching. He set his coat over the chair and sat across from her. Tomorrow night, Parker & Co. is hosting a fundraising gala for the Scholarship Foundation, he said plainly. All the major shareholders, partners, and the press will be there. And I need you to come with me. Kate lowered her book. Daniel, you know, I don't belong in places like that. That's exactly why you have to be there, he countered. If we want this arrangement to look real, you need to be seen at important events. She was ready to refuse, but the look in his eyes told her this wasn't just a party. It was a test, not for him, but for her. In front of his world, she exhaled slowly. Fine, but I'm not going to be entertainment for your rich friends. He gave the faintest smile. Trust me, sometimes the only way to prove you're strong enough to stay is to step into someone else's territory, no matter how uneasy it makes you. The next morning, Daniel took her to a luxury boutique on Fifth Avenue. Rows of gowns shimmered under soft golden lights, attendants moving with quiet precision. Kate felt out of place, surrounded by dresses that cost more than her monthly rent. A saleswoman presented a deep emerald evening gown, sleek fabric that skimmed her curves, a modest V-neck that caught the light when she moved. Kate stepped out of the dressing room, smoothing the skirt. Daniel was checking his phone, but when he looked up, his gaze stopped cold. You, he said quietly, are perfect. She flushed, glancing away. It's just a dress, but she knew, from the way he was looking at her, that he wasn't seeing the dress at all. He was seeing the girl she had been 15 years ago. The one who had once kept him awake at night. Emotional beat. Sometimes you don't realize how much you've changed until you see yourself reflected in the eyes of someone who once knew you better than anyone. The Waldorf Astoria ballroom glittered under crystal chandeliers, tables draped in crisp white linens, the soft chime of crystal glasses, the low hum of a grand piano, and the swirl of expensive perfume filled the air. Daniel walked in with Kate at his side, and every head turned. The whispers started instantly. Who is she? That's not his ex-wife. Maybe she's the one from the rumors. Daniel introduced her to CEOs, investors, and women in couture gowns who scanned her from head to toe. Before offering polite smiles, Kate returned the courtesies, her fingers tightening around her wine glass. At the head table, an older businesswoman leaned in with a too smooth smile. So, Kate, how did you and Daniel meet? The tone dripped with implication. Kate hesitated, then felt Daniel's hand find hers under the table, steadying her. She smiled, her voice calm. We're an old story, but sometimes the past has a way of finding its way back. For a moment, the table fell silent. Then a ripple of laughter passed through. Daniel glanced at her, pride flickering in his eyes. When you're standing in a room that isn't yours, one well-timed sentence can turn you from an outsider into the center of the room. When the auction ended, the music shifted to a slow rhythm. Daniel extended his hand. Dance with me. She shook her head at first, but his look left no room for argument. His palm rested gently against her back, guiding her across the floor. Kate looked up, catching the reflection of the chandeliers in his eyes. You did well tonight, Daniel murmured. She pressed her lips together. So did you? But don't think this changes anything. He smiled faintly, leaning just close enough for his voice to be hers alone. I don't need it to change anything. I just want more time. They turned slowly, beneath a soft glow of crystal light, and for a moment, every gaze around them faded away, leaving only the music and the rhythm of their hearts. There are moments when you forget every reason you built your walls, and all you want is to stay, just for one more beat. Part 7. The Promise to Protect. That night, the penthouse kitchen still glowed with warm light. The gala was over, but the echo of glances, loaded questions, and whispered speculation still lingered in Kate's mind. She stood at the sink, rinsing her hands under warm water, steam fogging the window's reflection. Daniel walked in, tea gone, the top 2 buttons of his shirt undone. He poured himself a glass of water and leaned casually against the counter. You've been quiet since we left the party, he said, his voice low, not accusatory. But noticing, Kate gave a small shrug without meeting his eyes. I'm just not used to that kind of attention. His brow furrowed. What kind of attention? The kind that inspects every detail, waiting for you to slip, just so they can smile about it. He stepped closer. They don't matter, Kate. What matters is that you and Sophie are safe. She stilled, the words catching her off guard, but not enough to make her trust them yet. Sometimes, a simple sentence makes you want to believe, but the wounds of the past keep you rooted in place. Small footsteps pattered across the wood floor. Sophie, in bunny print pajamas, rubbed her sleepy eyes. Mommy, I'm thirsty. Kate poured her a glass of water. Daniel sat at the table, watching the little girl climb into a chair. You know, he told her gently, your mom was very brave today. Sophie's head tilted. Brave how? Brave enough to walk into a room she'd never been in, stand in front of strangers, and still smile, Daniel said with quiet pride. That's what superheroes do. Sophie giggled. Then what kind of superhero are you, Mr. Daniel? He looked right into her eyes. Really looked. And for the first time, didn't deflect. The kind who protects you and your mom, no matter what. Kate's hand tightened around her glass. The words landed with a weight she wasn't prepared for, clear, certain, like a vow. Children believe in promises completely. And sometimes, that trust forces adults to realize they have to keep them. Sophie leaned her elbows on the table, gazing up at him. Do you really promise you won't disappear like in the movies? Daniel leaned closer, holding out his pinky. Pinky promise. Her smile bloomed as she hooked her tiny finger around his. Kate stood watching, her heart softening in a way she didn't expect. The man who had once walked away from her now sat in front of her daughter, making a promise as if he knew losing a child's trust is losing everything's. When Daniel looked up, his eyes met hers as if to say, I'm not just promising her, I'm promising you. She glanced away, but the faintest smile betrayed her. Sometimes, people don't ask for your forgiveness with words. They earn it by showing kindness to the one you love most. Later, after Sophie was tucked back in bed, Kate remained in the kitchen, leaning against the counter. Daniel returned, stopping a few steps away. I know. You don't trust easily, he said quietly, but tonight's promise I'll keep it, even if it means standing against anyone. Kate studied him for a long moment. Even if it costs you everything. His answer came without hesitation. Kate, you and Sophie are everything. She drew in a deep breath, feeling something inside her crack, not enough to break the wall completely, but enough for a sliver of light to slip through. They stood there, saying nothing more, the steady tick of the clock filling the silence, a rare moment of peace in the middle of a storm. Love doesn't always start with a confession. Sometimes it starts with a promise you intend to keep until the very end. Part 8. The Trial of Fate. Morning in Manhattan was the color of lead. A fine drizzle sifted down, like chalk dust settling on the stone steps of the family court. The third-floor hallway stretched long and dim, the fluorescent tubes humming overhead. The worn tile floors reflecting the hurried blur of passers-by lawyers clutching briefcases, security guards with radios, mothers rocking drowsy children. The mingled scents of damp paper, stale ink, and cold coffee carried a silent message. Here, the truth is more than words. It is the breath of days spent waiting. Kate sat on a wooden bench against the wall. Her beige coat was buttoned tight, her hands gripping a manila envelope until her knuckles whitened. Her hair was pulled back in a rushed knot, her body aching from a sleepless night. Each time footsteps neared, she would lift her head, bracing for an invisible blade. Sophie sat between two women, a court liaison, and Carmen, the warm-eyed woman who always seemed to smile with her gaze. The little girl clutched a teddy bear, legs swinging, and glanced at her mother. "Mommy, if the judge is nice, will he like my drawing?" Kate gave a soft smile, leaning her forehead to her daughter's. "You just hold my hand. Let me worry about the rest." The elevator doors slid open. Daniel stepped out, navy suit, cut sharp, charcoal tie in place, but his eyes betrayed an anxious pulse. He walked straight to her, stopping like a wall against the wind. "I'm here," he said low, "and I'm not going anywhere." From the far end of the hall, Ricardo appeared, clean-shaven, hair slicked back, a red tie blazing like a challenge. Beside him, his lawyer in a black robe carried a thick case file, eyes cold as steel. Ricardo's thin smile at Daniel was razor-sharp. The bailiff's voice rang out, "Rodriguez Morales, courtroom 5." When the heavy wooden doors swung open, Kate knew today wasn't only about custody. It was about whether a child could still believe in the adults around her. Courtroom 5 was packed. Judge Martel, a middle-aged Latina woman with her hair in a neat bun and eyes like polished onyx, sat high behind the bench. The gavel struck. "Proceed." Ricardo's lawyer rose, his voice smooth as lacquer. "Your Honor, the respondent, Mr. Ricardo Morales, comes today, seeking the chance to be a father again. In contrast, the petitioner, Ms. Catherine Rodriguez, has shown a pattern of instability, dragging her child through fleeting romances, moving into a luxury penthouse with CEO Daniel Parker mere days after meeting him, exposing the child to the media, and he flipped a page most recently, allowing a strange man to breach the penthouse level, endangering the girl. A ripple of whispers cut the air. Daniel's jaw flexed. Kate's fingers pinched her coat hem. The lawyer gestured to an enlarged photo, Kate holding Sophie on the front steps. Police lights flashing behind them, evidence of a living environment manipulated by wealth and emotion. Kate's public defender stood a young woman with curly hair, shadows under her eyes from nights of poring over files. "Your Honor," she began, voice trembling, yet steady. "This so-called luxury is a shield against the tabloid wolves. In truth, my client works 2 jobs to support her child. She moved into the penthouse under an agreement. But this little girl has never gone without food, books, or love." Kate took the stand, fingers laced, voice oddly even. "I'm not perfect. I've been afraid. I've chosen the lesser of bad options to protect her. But every morning, I rise before dawn to make breakfast. Every night, I read to her. I know she loves the scent of orange peel, hates carrots, and only sleeps deeply when it rains. I know every fever, every scrape, every tiny sadness." Her voice caught. "I know, because I'm there." The opposing lawyer struck. "There inside a wealthy man's home you just met." He laid out photos. Kate in an evening gown, Daniel's hand at her back. Sophie beaming in a new library. Pretty picture, but does pretty mean safe? The room was still enough to hear the clerk's pen tapping. Kate's lips pressed thin, eyes shadowed. She could answer, but knew the truth. In the wrong mouth. Could turn into a blade. Sometimes you pour out your heart, and people only hear what they've already decided to believe. That is the loneliest moment in the world. Does the petitioner have any witnesses? The judge asked. Kate's lawyer inhaled. Yes, Daniel Parker. The name dropped like a stone into a well. A few phones lifted, then lowered quickly. Daniel rose, each step carrying him away from sterile boardrooms. KPI charts, hollow applause toward the eyes of a little girl and the calloused hands of a mother. He was sworn in. How long have you known Ms. Rodriguez? The lawyer asked. 15 years and 3 weeks. A few chuckles. Daniel smiled faintly. 15 years ago, I knew her as a brave young woman who laughed when the wind turned. In the last 3 weeks, I've known her as a mother. Be specific. I've seen her wake before 6 to warm her daughter's coat over the fire. I've seen her refuse a private chef so Sophie would remember her mother's kitchen. I've seen her teach her daughter to write thank you notes to the doorman, the old man walking his dog, the music teacher, anyone who showed kindness. I've seen her stand in my doorway, placing herself between Sophie and a drunken man, ready to take the hit so the child wouldn't be afraid. The courtroom seemed to breathe. A woman dabbed at her eyes in the back row. Kate bowed her head, her shoulders trembling. Ricardo's lip curled. And Sophie, Daniel's eyes found the little girl. I know she likes to make bubble angels in the pool, even though it nearly ruined the filter. I know she counts stars by linking them into the letters of her name. I know that when she's scared, all it takes is resting her head on her mother's shoulder for 7 seconds. He smiled softly, and I know last night she placed her teddy bear by her mother's bed to stand guard. Because today she had to come to court. The air tightened. The judge's mouth softened slightly. Mr. Parker, the lawyer asked, why would a CEO abandon a meeting with investors to be here? Daniel didn't blink. Because meetings can be rescheduled. Childhood can't. When a man puts his heart's calendar ahead of his business calendar, what you hear isn't a defense. It's a new definition of priority. Ricardo's lawyer approached, smile polite but eyes sharp. You love her, don't you? Yes. And is that love why you paint everything in rose colors? Why you use your media reach to blur her mistakes? Why you buy her circumstances? Daniel leaned back, calm. I have the power to do many things, but I can't make a child say, I trust you, if she doesn't. I can't buy her peace and sleep at any price. I can only earn it. He looked at Sophie. By keeping my word. The lawyer narrowed his eyes. Keeping your word. Any proof beyond sentimental stories? Yes. Daniel's voice was steady. I'm willing to fund Sophie's education for life under her mother's name, the Catherine Rodriguez Scholarship, regardless of today's verdict. I'll amend my media contracts so any article mentioning her will blur her face and require permission. I'll cover counseling fees for Ricardo, if the court sees fit, to help him learn to meet his daughter as a decent father. Ricardo shot up. I'm not going to counseling. Order. The judge barked, gavel striking. Sounds noble, the lawyer said. But aside from infatuation, what proof do you have that this mother is as exceptional as you say? Daniel's tone was crisp. I have mornings of her warming a coat, nights of her cooling, Sophie's fever, counting to 10. Like a ritual, I have a pinky promise with a little girl. Pinkies never lie. And I have myself a man willing to be called a fool for putting them ahead of everything I've built. Silence fell, soft as snow. The simplest truths often arrive last, but when they do, they stand without a backdrop. Judge Martell closed the file, her gaze cutting through the haze. She looked long at Ricardo, then at Kate, finally at Daniel. The gavel struck. After reviewing testimony, evidence, and conduct, the court maintains primary custody with Catherine Rodriguez. Mr. Ricardo Morales will have supervised visitation 2 hours a week at the Family Support Center, contingent upon anger management and alcohol counseling. Any breach will result in suspension. A temporary protective order is granted, barring unscheduled contact at Sophie's residence. No applause. Courtrooms are not theaters. Only the sound of breath breaking free. Ricardo slammed a fist, his lawyer gripping his arm. Kate covered her face, not crying aloud, but trembling all over. Sophie looked at her, asking with her eyes. Kate nodded a small nod that felt like unshackling chains. Daniel stood still. No smile, no triumph, just turned to Kate. She lifted her head. Their eyes met. Not summers past, not broken promises, only the present, a promise kept. With all the trembling a heart can hold, the hallway's noise returned. The rain had stopped. Late sunlight spilled through the frosted glass. Carmen carried Sophie over. The girl flung her arms around her mother's neck, whispering, "We did it, Mommy." Daniel kept a step back, unwilling to break the circle. Kate let go, looked at him. "Thank you." She said no flourish, no excess, just 2 words, heavy with 15 years. He shook his head. "You don't owe me anything." "No," she said, eyes glistening, "but my heart is less afraid." Sophie tugged his hand. "Can we go home? The kind with the bubble pool." Daniel laughed for the first full time that day. "Home is where you feel safe." "Where is that today, Princess?" Sophie looked from her mother to him. "Between you two." She placed her mother's hand into his. Their fingers closed, not tight enough to hurt, just enough to feel each other's pulse. Outside, the city spun on, tireless, but inside that small circle, time slowed, as if granting them one more breath to believe fragile things could stand. Some victories have no fireworks, only the moment one hand finds another. But in that moment, you know you found your way home. Part 9. The Confession and the Proposal. The November night air in New York still carried a bite, but the rooftop of Parker Tower's penthouse glowed beneath a soft halo of golden string lights coiled around the glass railing. Below, the city stretched out like an artificial sea of stars, each window a story, each point of light a heartbeat. Kate stepped out through the sliding glass door, wrapped in a cream-knit sweater. The scent of freshly polished oak from the deck mingled with the gentle mint from the potted plants Daniel had placed in the corner. Far ahead, Daniel stood at the railing, his dark suit crisp, tie loosened. He didn't turn at the sound of her footsteps. Or maybe he was simply trying to hold on to one last moment alone. "The city's prettier from up here," Kate said softly. Daniel turned, a faint smile lifting his lips, but his eyes shone brighter than the lights. "It's not the city, Kate, it's you." The words were simple, but they brushed against something unguarded inside her. Since the trial ended, they'd had no real conversation. Only quiet nods, silent glances. Some sentences don't need to be poetic. They just need to find you when you're unprepared, and they stay. Daniel exhaled, closing the space between them until only a few feet remained. "Kate, for 15 years, I tried convincing myself that what I felt back then was just a piece of youth, something you leave behind when you grow up. I threw myself into work, lived inside meetings and spreadsheets, but every time I saw someone's hair caught in the wind or heard an old song, I thought of you." Kate gave a small smile, though her eyes glistened. 15 years is a long time. "Daniel, long enough for everything to change." "Not everything," he said firmly. I still remember that afternoon on the beach when you told me, "Don't forget me." I promised, and I never did. The night breeze carried the faint scent of lavender from the planter beside them, like a memory that refuses to fade. Kate bit her lip, gaze dropping to the city below. I thought you'd forgotten. Daniel stepped closer. I've forgotten a lot failed strategies, numbers that vanished overnight, but not your voice. Not the way you laughed when you found a seashell and held it like treasure. Not the way your eyes lit up when you talked about a future. One I didn't have the courage to build with you. When someone remembers the very details you thought they'd lost, your heart wavers between wanting to cry and wanting to smile. The sliding door opened again. Sophie padded out in pink pajamas and bunny slippers, carrying a navy velvet box almost too big for her hands. "Mommy, Uncle Dan says I have a very important job," she announced, eyes sparkling. Kate arched a brow. "And what's that?" "Princess." Sophie stepped between them, glancing up at Daniel. He gave her an encouraging nod. She opened the box. Inside sat an elegant platinum ring, its diamonds scattering the light into 1,000 tiny stars. "Uncle Dan says I should ask for him," Sophie said seriously. "Mommy, will you marry him?" Kate laughed through her tears, covering her mouth. Daniel sank to one knee, eyes never leaving hers. "I want the three of us to be a family, not just on paper, not just when it's easy every day. I want to make breakfast with you, walk Sophie to school, and sit beside you when our hair turns gray. Kate, will you give me the chance to keep this promise for life?" The whole world seemed to hold its breath, waiting for her answer. When a child hands you a ring for the person you love, it's not just a proposal. It's an invitation into a family that already has a place for you. Kate looked at Sophie, then at Daniel. 15 years ago, you missed me, but tonight, you won't. She held out her hand. Daniel slid the ring onto her finger, his hand trembling, not from the cold, but from the fear that this might be only a dream. Sophie squealed, wrapping her arms around them both. "Now we're really a family." She pressed her cheek to Kate's, then to Daniel's, as if to make sure they'd both heard. They stood there, the three of them, beneath a sky where city lights and real stars blurred into one, the line between them impossible to see. Behind them, the lavender swayed in the breeze. Before them, the city kept spinning. But within this embrace, in this rhythm of hearts, time stood still. Daniel whispered against Kate's ear, "Thank you for letting me make it right." Kate leaned into his shoulder. "Thank you for coming back." Some moments don't arrive like fireworks. They come like a warm wind, quiet, steady, certain, just enough to let you know you've finally come home. Part 10, A Complete Family. New York, December. Snow drifted down as if someone were sprinkling powdered sugar over the streets. Winter light streamed through the grand suite windows at the plaza, where Kate sat before the mirror, wrapped in an ivory gown of delicate lace that hugged her shoulders and fell into a soft, flowing train. Beside her, Sophie wore a blush pink princess dress. Clutching a tiny basket, she tilted her head at her mother, while carefully arranging rose petals inside. "Mommy, are you nervous?" Kate smiled, smoothing her daughter's hair. "A little, but when I look at you, I feel calm." The door opened and Carmen stepped in, carrying a bouquet of white roses and lavender. "Daniel's downstairs. He's asked at least 3 times if everything's all right." She laughed. Kate exhaled. "He always wants to be sure about everything. Even this." Sophie tilted her head. "Well, this is the most important thing. At life's turning points, sometimes it's the innocence of a child that keeps an adult's heart steady." The ceremony was held in one of the hotel's small salons, intimate, yet elegant. A high ceiling with crystal chandeliers reflected candlelight in shimmering waves. 2 neat rows of chairs lined a white aisle runner, flanked by lavender and rose arrangements. Daniel stood at the end of the aisle in a tailored black tuxedo and white tie, eyes taut with anticipation. When the music began, the guests rose. The doors opened. Sophie appeared first, scattering rose petals into the air. Each step, she looked back and grinned at her mother. Kate followed, her arm trembling slightly, but her gaze fixed straight ahead on Daniel. As she reached him, he extended his hand. Kate placed hers in his, and immediately, Sophie slipped between them, taking both their hands at once. Cameras clicked. But for them, this moment was all that mattered. Three hands, bound in a single, unbreakable thread. Some handholds connect more than two people. They stitch together parts of life you thought would never meet again. The officiant smiled. Daniel, would you like to say something before we begin? Daniel nodded and turned to Kate. I once let you go. That was the biggest mistake of my life. I've learned that success means nothing without someone to share it with. From today, I promise to be the shoulder you lean on, the safe home for Sophie, and the one who keeps your heart warm, no matter the storms outside. Kate bit her lip, then replied, I once believed fairy tale happiness wasn't for me, but you proved it could be real when someone is patient enough, sincere enough. I promise to nurture not only Sophie, but this love, to let it grow, ripen, and never be forgotten. Sophie stood between them, eyes glistening. In the hush, she whispered, I love you, Mommy. I love you. Daddy! The word daddy rang like a seal on something that had existed for a long time. Only now, it had a name. When a child calls you mom or dad for the first time, it's more than a title. It's a recognition of the heart. After the ceremony, the reception unfolded in a warm, golden glow. Soft jazz floated through the air. Daniel offered his hand. Mrs. Parker, she smiled, placing her hand in his. They stepped onto the floor. But Sophie ran up, arms lifted. Me too, Daniel laughed, scooping her up. And together they spun, the three of them moving to the music. Laughter blended with the music, the applause, and the sparkle of chandeliers. It wasn't a perfect dance, but it was the dance of a family that had finally found each other. When the song ended, Daniel kissed Kate's forehead. Then Sophie's. Let's go home, he said. This time, home wasn't an address. It was anywhere they were together. Happiness isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just an imperfect dance, as long as the right hands are holding yours. Under the warm lights, Daniel, Kate, and Sophie left the reception hall, their laughter floating into the winter night. No longer a stoic CEO, no longer a woman carrying her burdens alone, just a man holding the hand of the woman he loved, and a little girl skipping ahead. In Kate's heart, the fractured pieces of her past had come together into something whole. She realized that sometimes a second love isn't starting over with someone new. It's finding each other again to finish the story you once left undone. And when two people choose to hold hands through every storm, that story stops being unfinished. It becomes a new journey, complete. They didn't promise never to argue, nor to avoid every hardship, but they promised never to let go and to always find their way home. Wherever home might be, life doesn't always offer second chances, but when it does, be brave enough to take it, because it might be the only chance your heart has to truly heal. Do you believe in second chances in love? Share your thoughts in the comments and tell us what you think of this story. Don't forget to rate it from 0 to 10. Hit follow and tap the bell so you won't miss the next moving story.